Today, folks, we have the story of a man who apparently made the wrong choice, leading to a youth minister ending up on the FBI Most Wanted list. Hello, folks, I'm Steve Gilly, along with Rod Mullins, and this is another one of the stories of Appalachia.
Yeah, I've often wondered that about myself sometimes. If I went left when I should have went right or whatever the case may be. Saying no to something when you really wanted to say yes, you should have done something out of that. But once again, Steve, we've got one of these great stories, and it comes out of Fentress County, Tennessee, or at least begins in Fentress County, Tennessee. Just like we were talking one time, I think, before we were recording, that a lot of good stories come out of Fentress County.
It's a wellspring of Appalachian history, I do believe. I think this is like the fourth or fifth story we've gotten out of Fentress County. But it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, especially if you like crime stories. Okay. Well, Billy Dean Anderson is who we're going to be talking about. And his story is an extraordinary one. Born on July 12th, 1934, in the community of Pell, Fentress County, Tennessee, in the Wolf River Valley. That, by the way, the same place where World War I hero Alvin York was from. His life took a dark and intriguing turn that led him to become a folk hero of sorts.
Well, little is known about Billy's early life, but we do know that he attended, what a name for a school, too, Rotten Fork. Could have been Rotten Spoon, could have been Rotten Knife, but it was Rotten Fork Elementary School, where he developed a penchant for sketching instead of doing his homework. Kind of sounds like me when I was in school, showing what would become a lifelong love for drawing. Well, despite that, Anderson didn't appear to be a delinquent or troubled youth. In fact, he volunteered to be a preacher at the Wolf River Methodist Church at the age of 18. He had a somewhat stocky build, standing at 5'8" and weighing somewhere between 160 and 170 pounds. He worked as a mechanic, unskilled laborer, tree surgeon, farmer, and, in line with those sketches, he used to draw in his school books, an artist.
Well, Billy Dean's life, though, took a dark turn in June 1959. Anderson, along with two friends, committed armed robbery at a drive-in theater in Jamestown, Tennessee. When the theater usher showed the trio he had just nothing as far as money, well, Anderson shot toward him, intentionally missing. The three men took what they could and ran off, managing to evade the police for several hours. Well, the law caught up with them the next morning at the Wolf River Methodist Church, where the three were hiding out. There, they got into a standoff with the police, but were eventually captured. Since he was a first-time offender, Anderson served only 4 months in jail for the armed robbery of the drive-in. And that one event, folks, marked the beginning of a crime spree that would define Anderson's life. Over the next several years, he was involved with crimes in both Tennessee and in Indiana. In 1962, Anderson was arrested on charges that he had robbed the Cozy Lodge in Muncie, Indiana, after having been returned to that state on extradition from Tennessee for earlier charges. And in May 1962, he managed to escape from the Delaware County Jail in Muncie through a narrow ventilator shaft.
Well, Steve, this was just all the start of something. That October, Anderson pulled a shotgun on Tennessee state troopers in Jamestown, shot an officer, and ultimately surrendered after being wounded, with a bullet grazing his head and 2 shots in his stomach. A teenager with him, 17-year-old George Long, well, he wasn't so lucky. He was shot and paralyzed from the waist down during the gun battle. At court, he was sentenced to a 10-year prison term. He didn't stay there for 10 years, though, because this time Billy Dean Anderson became a model prisoner, earning him his freedom after only 4 years behind bars. Well, trying to leave this troubled past behind on the recommendation of a lawyer to leave Tennessee, Anderson moved back to Indiana, to Muncie, but trouble followed him. He received a suspended prison term for armed robbery and assault on one condition. Billy Dean Anderson was to leave the state of Indiana and never to return. So, with that, Anderson packed up his bags and headed back to Fentress County in Tennessee, and yet another run in with the law. He became involved in a standoff with the Fentress County sheriff and a deputy, which resulted in 2 consecutive 7-year prison terms, of which he served 4 years before being released.
Okay, so 14 years basically, down to 4 years for what he did. Hmm. Well, Rod, when he got out in 1970, he again returned to Muncie, despite being ordered not to ever come back to Indiana. There, he got a job as a gas station attendant. And one day, he and a customer got into an altercation, which escalated to Anderson pulling a gun on said customer. And that incident earned him a 10 to 25-year sentence at the Indiana State Prison. Now, that decades-long sentence was it was shortened too, as Billy Dean Anderson was granted parole in 1972, only 2 years. And once again, he moved yet again back to Tennessee, this time going to Morgan County so he could avoid the law in Fentress County. Now, that didn't help, though. Anderson soon ran afoul of the law in Morgan County and ended up shooting a deputy sheriff in 1973. He was arrested and tried for the shooting, and on January 15th, 1974, Billy Dean Anderson was convicted of aggravated assault, attempted burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, and as a habitual criminal, as defined by Tennessee statute. This conviction, Rod, was serious, and Anderson apparently realized that this time he was going to have to serve some seriously long prison time. So in December 1974, he, along with another inmate, escaped the Morgan County Jail and became a wanted man.
Well, this escape, unlike the others, landed Anderson on the FBI Most Wanted list on January 21st, 1975. Even though he was on the run, Anderson stayed close to home. He found refuge in the mountainous terrain of Pickett County, Tennessee. There, he was assisted by local residents, some of them moonshiners and sympathetic to his cause, and he lived in a cave not too far from the Fentress County line, evading capture for more than 4 years. There, he apparently spent his time doing what he always loved to do: drawing. He drew and painted countless paintings, many of them religious in nature, including numerous paintings of Christ. Kind of strange, but still, that's what he did. Over those years, the FBI hadn't forgotten Billy Dean Anderson, and they stayed on his trail until they found him. Among those folks who knew Billy Dean was hiding close to home was one person who the FBI dubbed the Mountain Man. Mountain Man tipped off the FBI that Anderson was close to home and in hiding. Agents made the decision to stake out Anderson's 75-year-old mother's house, figuring sooner or later he'd visit her at some point.
And they were correct, Rod. On July 7th, 1979, as Anderson was leaving his mother's home, he was shot twice. Now, some reports said that he attempted to run and was shot by state troopers. Others that FBI snipers dressed in black ambushed and shot him. Either way, Billy Dean Anderson was killed that day.
Yeah. And those stories surrounding Anderson's death are numerous. Some say that he got caught in a barbed wire fence. Others claim they tricked his mother into calling his name. But despite his troubled life, Anderson was a gifted painter. In prison, he created over 300 paintings, most of them idealized versions of a muscular Christ. He was also an accomplished woodcarver. Brushes and paint were found in his cave hideout in Pickett County, showcasing his dedication to art even as he was evading capture and imprisonment. Now, Billy Dean Anderson painted dozens of paintings during his life. Many of them are still displayed in local homes and churches throughout Tennessee, Indiana, Kentucky, and beyond. And you know what? He also painted a different kind of picture of who he was. As a known robber and so forth, he was quite a unique individual, you could say, Steve.
Well, I mean, this just illustrates that point. Just take the wrong turn somewhere in life, that one turn, like he did doing that robbery, and it changed his entire life. At the core, though, from what it looks like to me, he was more of an artistic sort, who loved to
Mm-hmm.
paint and carve and, create, kind of like a creator back then, just put it that way. Shame
Mm-hmm.
that he got involved in what he did and let that define a lot of his life, though.
Yeah. And here's another thing, too. We really didn't, have an account of what I guess his temperament was. But, from the sound of it, he might have had a short fuse for a temper because, I mean, look, he pulls a gun on a guy that's a customer, pulls into the service station he's working at. Who knows? He could have said something to the guy and the guy said something back and that just kind of sent him off. Who knows? But, that's the basics of the information we have on Billy Dean Anderson. But it's another one of those interesting stories that, sometimes people talk about locally, but it's a chance for us to kind of spotlight it on a particular region of Appalachia.
Well, and one thing I do want to add on this too is that he still has family up there. And
Mm-hmm.
there are Facebook pages and places like that that, talk about him. His family, it appears, seems to think that the cops had something out for him and that he was
Mm.
doing his best to avoid the police, but that they were kind of aggravating some of this stuff on and egging him into doing some of the things that he did. And it wasn't all his fault, as far as that goes. So there's a couple of different sides to the story. It's just a very fascinating
Right.
story. However, he got into what he got into. Just imagine being in a cave for those years that he was hiding out, trying
Mm-hmm.
to stay away from being caught, and didn't do him any good. I mean, the FBI persisted, and they finally got their man, killed him right there. And folks, that's the story of outlaw Billy Dean Anderson, another one of the stories of Appalachia. Thanks for listening. Now, be sure to subscribe to the Stories podcast so you don't miss any of our stories. We're on Spreaker, Spotify, Audible, and on Apple Podcasts, among others. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.